News Center Maine is partnering with the Maine-Monitor to bring you some of the reporting being done by journalists at the independent nonprofit publication. This week, we are talking about ranked choice voting. Maine voters approved ranked choice voting in 2016, but after nearly a decade, that system has never been fully implemented. Voters will be using ranked choice voting for both state and federal elections in the June primary. But when the general election rolls around in November, they will only be using ranked choice voting to rank candidates in the federal races. Opponents and supporters alike see this system as a recipe for confusion and frustration. However, after a recent ruling by Maine's Supreme Court, that approach does not appear to be changing anytime soon. Here to talk about it is Matt Junker, the elections and government reporter for the Maine-Monitor. Matt, this has been an interest for me for a long time that ranked choice voting applies only in certain situations. Why isn't ranked choice voting used the same way in Maine primaries compared to general elections?
So, Chris, the simplest answer to that, and it's not a very simple answer, is the state constitution. Yeah. So since the late 1800s, the Maine Constitution has had what's known as these plurality provisions that require certain offices be elected by a plurality rather than a majority. And so that means you don't have to get 50% or more of the vote. It's just the person who gets the most votes win. It could be 38%, it could be 42%, it doesn't have to be 50. And that actually dates back to some failed elections that happened at the time. The state constitution used to provide for majority elections, but you had people that didn't get to 50%, no one got to 50% of the vote. And those elections ended up in a failed sort of chaotic situation where the legislature actually determined who won because nobody got to 50%. So at the time, people didn't really like that. We ended up changing the Constitution to require plurality provisions. Now, that's a very long lead into the fact that ranked choice voting essentially requires majority winners. And so even before that referendum question was passed in 2016, you had some people raising concerns saying ranked choice voting is going to require majority provisions. It's not going to line up with some of the plurality language in the state constitution. And so what that has in a six sort of series of court cases and other things, we've led to this bifurcated process where it's allowed in ranked choice voting is used in the elections that are not specifically named in the Constitution as needing as a plurality provision. So that means federal elections, so congressional elections, and now it's actually ranked choice voting has been extended to presidential as well. But it's not allowed in gubernatorial elections, at least in the general and for the state house, because those offices specifically in the Constitution are singled out for having plurality elections. Now that's a very long and convoluted explanation, but it explains how we got to this scenario where you can use it in some but not in all, and it's further complicated by the fact that primary elections are governed by statute and not the Constitution. So ranked choice voting can be used in the primary elections for governor and the state house, but not in the general. So that's, again, kind of a sprawling explanation, and but it most directly is tied back to our Constitution and a debate that happened in the late 1800s.
And that is kind of the key hang up here, right? Somebody winning a majority of the votes, 50% plus one, versus a plurality of the votes, which is kind of the way ranked choice is designed. Right. You might get 38% of the votes and have the most of all the candidates, right?
Right, exactly. And so there's been a lot of debate over that process. It's been 10 years now. Yeah. And there's even been some debate over what exactly a plurality versus a majority means. And so that has evolved. And different state Supreme Courts have weighed in on this somewhat recently, and that's something else that we can get into here. But that's one of the more updates as well.
Matt Junker, the elections and government reporter for the Maine-Monitor. Matt, thanks so much for spending some time with us.
Thank you, Chris. I appreciate the time.
You can read the rest of Matt's reporting at the-maine-monitor.org.